started with a dream, now you leading a team, working it closing them deals, working with purpose. You don't walk around with a purse, but you working it, walking the heels. Beauty and brains, speaking and fighting for change.
All right, ladies, welcome back to another session on the Flippin and Hills presents the third annual Badass Women in Real Estate Virtual Summit. And I have a very, very special friend of mine, Miss Ariam Kesete. Hey, girl.
Hey, girl. How you doing?
Good. How are you? CEO and founder of AK Development. I love it.
Yo, do that again.
You said do it again.
Just kidding. And you can't get in those words, right? CEO.
I know. Boss. I love it. And tell the people, like, how old are you, first of all?
Now, you know you don't ask a woman for her age. I'm 31 years old as of January 11th.
So you are 31, developer. And how long have you had the developer title?
I want to say I founded AK Development in 2016, but I think my soul was driven in 2009.
Love it. And so let's go back. Let's take people back before we, touch on the Wonder Woman that you are today, in this development world, in this space. Where did it all start for you in 2009 or even prior to?
That's a good question. So what's interesting is you don't always try to think that every little thing you do in school or whatever the case may be, that it'll lead you to where you are today, right? So I think I was, 10, and I started to scribble on my teacher's desk or whatever the case may be, just to kind of express myself. And a lot of my scribbles were me drawing houses and buildings. And I was always intrigued by seeing different conceptual ideas of like how, when we're driving home, for example, if I see a design or a building that looks different from what I'm used to seeing, that always intrigued me. So it always was appealing to look at. But I don't think I ever thought as to how it got done until now.
Love it. And so in 2009, so you went to school. Did you go to school for real estate?
No, I actually went to school for business. So my core life has always been around business. You know how some people have like a God-given talent in something. I was never a swimmer. I was never into music. I was never artistic. That just was never a God-given gift. But what was so interesting was business just flew out of me. And so I went and got, pursued my degree in business. But I had a focus in real estate. I just didn't know to the capacity of what real estate was going to be or how it was going to work.
Gotcha. And so what is your very first involvement in real estate look like? The moment that you said, hey, I want to be in real estate?
I think it was when I always knew I wanted to get into real estate. I just thought maybe I was going to own a property or a family with properties. But I want to say it started really when I was a mental health service provider and working in certain communities and certain neighborhoods. And as a social service provider, as an organizer, one of the issues that we realized was, we're taking families and children out of certain environments and homes and putting them in completely different communities and then, reunifying them in a process, but at the same time bringing them back into properties or neighborhoods that they didn't do so well in, right? So what we noticed was that a lot of our families were unstable, and one of the core foundation of life was real estate, right? Housing. Stability is your basic needs need to be met in order for this family to be taken care of. I brought that concept, to the CEO of the organization. They were not, as they say, prepared for that mission. So I kind of started doing my own thing. So I bought 4 units, did that for a little while, and then I just kept adding to it.
I love it. I love it. Cool. And so from there, adding to it, were you like, okay, so I'm going to go, and I'm assuming it was like, okay, you have 4 units, and then the next time around you had a goal of, let's see, you just wanted more units? Or were you
Actually, what was so interesting is I was more into it because I was told I couldn't do it, right? So impulsiveness in me was like, all right, I'm going to show people I can do this. And at the same time, you know, my degree was in business. So, right, all I knew was numbers. And then here I am as a social worker, dealing with emotions and peoples and behaviors. And I'm sitting here saying to myself, and now I got to be making a whole lot more than this to be dealing with that. Right? So then I said, okay, well, if my core is happy doing this kind of service work, then I need to be able to balance that with having side income, right? So I think for me, real estate really started as a side hustle where the passion grew because I was doing social work that as a landlord, it was just flowing out of me. Like, you know what I mean? Like I could do it. It was, you know, real estate is all about people, right? So if I'm over here in the social work world and doing phenomenal work with it, but then it was one of those situations where it was transferable. So my side hustle was still somewhat a part of my main work. So it didn't seem like I was doing 15 different things to make ends meet, kind of, you know what I mean? So it sort of just created a specialty that I needed to be a part of. And real estate just kept flowing. And how, sorry, did I answer your question?
Yes. No, you're good. No, you are good. And so from there, I love that you mentioned that, you know, your background and your current work just guided you right into being a landlord, right? And we talk about that a lot. I know I talk about that a lot. And in regards to investing in real estate, you can flip, you can wholesale, you can do, you know, so many different things. But if you want to be a landlord, you should probably be good with people, right?
Yeah.
You should probably understand people, especially if you intend on self-managing. So like, do you currently self-manage all of the properties you own, or do you hire a property management company?
So I've attempted the norm, you know, where I self-manage, and then I've tried the property management side of things. But what I realized was that property management from a financial standpoint, it didn't work for them. So they didn't have the time to actually build the rapport with the families or the clients or the tenants, right? So what I did was I used my social work background as a means to create a shared model system, right? And what that means is, yes, I own the land. Yes, I'm responsible to it from a governmental standpoint. But when we look at it from a humanistic standpoint, we're sharing this system, right? So what I've done is I created a system where the tenants took care of the day-to-day issues of operating the business, right? Because every individual property is its own business. And what that has done is it's created accountability to the tenants, right? Mm-hmm. So it's created a system where I don't have to wait for an outside organization to come shovel my snow, because the tenants are going to take care of that, and they're going to take pride in it because that's where they live. And where it makes it shared is that if I'm charging them a certain amount of money, and I know that an additional $50 or so or $75 is going to help, you know, the tenant have a little more cushion in their pockets now, that's what I will do. But for me, it's not about saving dollars here and there kind of thing. It's more about what is the longevity of this individual that's staying in my place, but also how do we create a system where I don't have a rotation, you know what I'm saying? Where a tenant is not just renting 1 month, 1 year, it's longevity. And that has been successful for me.
I love it. And how do you identify that type of individual? Because, I mean, it's genius, right? And so I know the other ladies, men and women who are listening, I'm sure that light bulb just went off for a lot of folks. Like, that's genius. You know, how do you identify that type of individual?
I think, you know, when you're dealing with a person. But again, I've had 6 years of experience in dealing with all kinds of behavioral health division side of things, right? So from extreme craziness to corporate craziness, and they come in different forms, right? So a lot of times you know who you're dealing with when you look at the track record. But at the same time, what's interesting is the ones who people have said they had a bad track record have always been the success rate, in my opinion, for me, or in my experience. And part of why I say that is because you can't really judge a book by its cover, right? But you can judge a person by the mindset or the dynamics of how they plan to live for the next life. So if somebody immediately starts telling me exactly their issue and they don't take accountability right off the gate, that right there tells me that's not somebody I need to deal with on this particular housing level. Or if I do take that person on, then I'm expecting them to come with some kind of service already in place. So I contract with different organizations that will do 1 year to 2 year housing models where, they're going to teach them, finance or literacy about finance and making sure they're learning how to budget or whatever the case may be. Because one thing I do offer at the end of my term with some of my tenants is the option to buy, right? So because I personally finance all my deals for the most part, I have the flexibility to, one, connect with the tenants on a deeper level, but also be understanding when someone's, is going to be short to pay rent, like November, December. You get accustomed to doing real estate and how you do real estate based on how you finance your deal, right? So I don't have that pressure, so I can move in a very strategic and longevity way of doing deals.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, no, I love it. And so what do you think, like people who are looking to get into the development space, where should they start? I know that's a question you probably get all the time.
I guess when you get to a stage of development, you want to ask yourself what type of developer you want to be. And why I say that is because you could be a transactional developer, you can be a land developer, you can be a developer that gets a land control and gets ideas put out there, but may not ever want to take the risk of finance the deal themselves, right? So I would say figure out the type of developer that you want to be. And then also have, check yourself, figure out who you truly are, because development is not one of those kind of games that pay off the gate, right? It's one of those things where sometimes you might not see a payment 5 years from now, but doesn't mean that the idea, sometimes I guess what I'm trying to say is, depending on the type of developer you want to be and you plan to be, you have to be realistic with yourself and saying, if this is the type of developer I need to be, and I'm not going to be paid in 5 years, what do I need to do in the meantime so that when I am doing my deals, I'm not taking on too many liabilities or risk that could adhere me to doing more deals down the road, right? So what that means is having cushion, having money, having side hustles, getting out there and connecting with the community and, connecting with your alderman people, with your politicians, the mayors. I mean, these are all politicians, of course, but also understand banks. How do you do, how do you finance a deal? And believe it or not, I used to hear this myself as well, as it takes the same amount of time and energy to do a $1 million deal versus a $10 million development deal. It's the same process. It doesn't matter how you want to word it, whatever the case may be, it's all one set process. You have 14 different process of ways that you have to play when it comes to development. You have to be good with people.
Mm-hmm. And so I love the fact that you touched on that, the different types of development. Can you just break that down a little bit? I know you said like a transactional development developer or like a land developer. Can you break down exactly what those different, titles mean?
So a land developer, for example, is somebody who, you drive in, let's just say, for example, a rural area, right? So you see a land and you don't know who that land belongs to. So you do your due diligence where you research the project or the property, the land, who owns it, whatever the case may be. And within that land, you as a developer see an idea that could come to fruition, right? So then you do all your due diligence, you put the whole entire project together, and then you sell that deal to an actual developer that can actually finance the project. Because again, every step of real estate and every step of development has its own process. So you're in the pre-development phase, but that doesn't mean you can construct it. That doesn't mean you can finance. So then you sell it off to somebody who can actually take it to the end.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting, because you're getting paid for an idea as a developer.
Yep. And now, but not only that, you're doing all the pre-development work, which is making sure that land is actually zoned appropriately for what you're planning to do. You have to get the mayor's approval, and then you also have to make sure the finance or the actual capital stack works as well. And what I mean by capital stacks is how many, investors are going to have to come in to actually make this deal work. Is it feasible 5 years from now, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So that takes, that could take from a month to maybe sometimes a year.
Right.
No pay at all.
Yeah. And then a transactional developer.
A transactional developer is similar to a land developer, technically, where they're just putting a deal together like a land developer, but they may not have site control. They may not have anything. They're just transactionally doing the things. And some of them call themselves consultants, where they don't technically have ownership of it or anything like that, where they just help you put the whole deal together and allow you to do the whole thing. So that's just all it is transactional. And a lot of developers are transactional. If you ask them, a lot of them probably don't own the actual deals that they do.
And so when they sell it off, how are they able to still keep a piece of it and make money? Or do they sell it like they package it? Let's say it takes a year to package it, right? And then they sell it. Are they still technically involved in that deal until it's done? Or is everything different? Or does it depend?
It depends. It depends on who the buyer is, who the developer is, and how the land control or how the site is controlled. Just because they're land developers doesn't necessarily mean they own the land. But a lot of times they probably restricted that land to that organization for a max of 2 years only. You know what I mean? So,
hold on. Let's redo that one.
I have to burp.
We can add it. You say you got a burp? I was hoping that wasn't gonna happen, but let me see. I just want to check my. Yeah, we gonna edit all that out, and that should be good. Sorry. So the question was it how do they get paid?
Oh yeah. You'd really. I mean, it just depends on the developer and how they have themselves set up. So a lot of times they'll ask for pre-development funds, where a lot of different institutions will give you some funding to get your deal to from an idea stage to a potential stage to a actual development stage, right? And then you have working capital, where some people will take out a loan to live so that these ideas are conceptual. I just didn't have the fortune to just not work. So I've always kept a job. I've always had a hustle in some capacity, that it hasn't put me in a situation hello?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, sorry. It hasn't put me in a survival stage, right? So I'm not one of those, and I'm not to say that I know any developers who are in that stage, but some individuals, it's harder for us to make development and ethical decisions sometimes because we're surviving, right?
Yeah.
I paid attention to all of that and made sure I was okay and actually do things from a triple bottom line type of deals.
And so I love the fact that you touched on that, because you have to be in the right mindset in order to do this type of work, right? So how does that play, into the world of development, having the right mindset?
I think I can't speak for all developers, right, or any real estate, but I can speak for myself in saying that having the right mindset allowed me as an individual to look at things from a larger standpoint, but also making sure that I'm not putting myself in a position where I'm signing loans or deals that, one, is going to jeopardize the community, but also jeopardize my longevity, right? So being in the right mindset and making sure that, and even with mindset, what does that look like, right? What does that mean? And that's really just truly knowing yourself and who are you at the end of the day. And as a developer, one thing that I pride myself on is I sleep. I don't play about my 8 hours of sleep. If I can get it, I'm getting it, because it allows me to not only think from a logical standpoint, but also understanding that this deal can affect a lot of people, right? And so let's just, hypothetically, let's say I'm doing a deal and it's going to cost me $5 million to do this deal. Do you understand how many people get employed by just one deal alone? You know what I'm saying? So you have to really look at it from a larger situation than just you doing the deal, right? So $5 million can feed a lot of families. Right. You're talking about designers, you're talking about contractors, construction workers, plumbers, anything you name them. Everybody is doing something with the deal. And what's really unique about developers is a lot of times they're the last ones to get paid, right? And so you have to be okay with that, right? And what does that even look like? And what does that mean for you at the end of the day?
Yeah. Yeah. And what does that look like? You know, your ROI, your triple bottom line, like what does that look like getting paid as a developer? Because if you're putting in all of this work and like you said, 5 years down the line, I mean, how do you even calculate, you know, that return on investment?
So I really can't speak or shouldn't speak on things I haven't fully done yet. So I'm not in the millions of dollar range of projects yet, but I will say that from some of the projects I have done, I've set myself up in percentage of payouts, right? So, and I've heard other developers doing the same thing where you can actually contractually write yourself in from a banking standpoint and saying that as a developer, I want to stretch my $200,000, $300,000 payment in 5 different ways, right? Throughout the entire process of the project. You don't actually start seeing money until you're in construction, right? So when the first bank loan hits the ground and contractors are in there, you can set it up to where you could also be the paid person on there too, right? But then you may not see another payment next 6 months because you asked to stretch that one payment. But a lot of developers are usually doing 5, 6 different deals, partnering with other individuals so that they have some kind of deals coming, because the only deals people know about are the ones that actually get to be, planted on the ground. But what people don't know is that a lot of developers are usually working on 10, 15 deals, hoping that one cracks.
Yeah. And I was going to say that we didn't even touch on how many deals don't actually make it to breaking ground. And like you said, you can put in that work for, sometimes 2, 3, 6 months, a year, putting together a plan to submit and it not go through.
Absolutely. That is very possible. And you have situations where you might spend 3, 4 years of your life working on a deal and you put all your savings into it and then it doesn't happen. Are you okay with kind of taking losses on things, right? So that's a mindset, right? And that loss looks like, you know what I mean? Because it might be a loss in monetary, but it may not be a loss in knowledge, right? And information that you now have a whole nother understanding to, and you have to be okay with that, right? One thing about developers is we don't succeed if we're victims at all. So we may deal with a lot of victims, but that's not who we can be, right? So you developers, in my opinion, is somebody who's a leader. You're leading an entire organization to not only have people believe in this idea, but getting people to a point of just seeing the idea, planning the idea, and creating a concept of that idea. And that takes time, As they say, Bentleys or these expensive cars aren't made overnight, right? So a development deal that's going to house and create, reduce poverty, that's not something very minor. And that's something that you have to be rewarded for that. But sometimes it just depends on, is it monetary reward or is it more of just seeing people in a very healthy environment? Yeah.
And I love it because you have to be doing some sort of purpose work, right? Like being a developer is not, you don't wake up. It doesn't seem like you wake up tomorrow and decide that you want to be a developer. I mean, it takes some gut and some patience and some failure and some, hope and like all of the above, right? And with that being said, what are some of your biggest lessons that you feel as though you've had to learn throughout the process of development?
Don't be so eager to spend your own money to do a deal. There's a lot of people who will help, create capital stack that you need to make a deal happen. And if you don't believe in your deal, believe me, other people will see it and they will know as well. But also, I think that was the biggest lesson I had to learn was be mindful of using your own equity, but also understand that, sometimes your time is your equity, right? So that's my capital on this earth right now. So if I don't have any money, then that's my time. So if I'm giving people my time, then I better make sure that I'm extremely valuable to what I'm giving and what I'm saying. So I had to get that understanding. Credits, right? So there is 3 C's in banking, right? And the same thing happens to be the same core principles that you have to have in development. The same 5 C's that you have to have in banking is the same 5 C's that you have to have in development. Why? Because who are you at the end of the day? That's a character. If you right in the banking world, you ain't gonna be right in developing, because you have to be creative financer in order to do a deal. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Keep going. I want to break it on down. Give me the other C's, girl.
I got you. So it's character, capital, capacity, collateral, and condition, right? So what is the condition of the land? What is the condition of the property? What is the condition of whatever it is that you're trying to develop based on your neighborhoods, right? So if I'm developing in neighborhoods that are not high in numbers and aren't actually bringing in the rent collections that I need, then I have to be mindful in being able to articulate the fact that, hey, this is a neighborhood that's somewhat struggling, right? Not only just articulate, but you have to be realistic. And that was something I struggled with for a while is, I would see a certain neighborhood that didn't have a lot of functionality or resources that some neighborhoods did, right? But I'm a dreamer sometimes, and that could be my downfall, but it hasn't been bad for me. It's just I need to be reminded on things, right? And so here I am dreaming of this beautiful space, and this beautiful things, and, people are living and they're holding hands and they're literally skipping to the neighborhoods. And sometimes you need a reality check to say, hey, guess what? You need $7.5 million outside of private banking to make this deal work. What? Right? So that's the reality that I'm talking about.
I love your face. Do that again. What?
Because I was like, well, did he say $7 or $7.5 million? Okay, I got there. And that's the reality, right? Because we're in our neighborhoods where we want to put so much energy and time to, but guess what? You need capital staff to work a neighborhood like that.
Girl.
Right?
Yeah.
So instead, you have to know your tax credits. If you don't know your tax credits, and what I mean by that, I suggest everybody take the time to read all the laws within their states around real estate, all the tax credit associated to it. If you decide to have the solar panels in your apartment buildings that you develop, that's a tax credit, right? That's energy. That's renewable energy credit, right? And so these are the kind of tax credit, but also low-income tax credits. There's so many tax credit that the United States government offers for you to do work in neighborhoods, especially disadvantaged neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. But the crazy thing is, a lot of us live in those neighborhoods, right? So who better yet than us to actually develop our own neighborhoods? Because the word itself is disadvantage, but really it's an advantage, right? So just like impossible, actually it says impossible. Same thing with disadvantage. Take the dis out and it's an actual advantage neighborhood.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's just a matter of who is in it, who is it an advantage to, right? Who is able to benefit from it. I love it. And I'm so glad that you talked about us, right? Because actually that's one of my questions. So there isn't a lot of us in development, especially our age, especially young, especially women, right? This is the Women's Virtual Summit. And so, I mean, what is that like? I mean, I can imagine, when you're in a room and you sometimes, I don't know how often, and you are the only woman of color and young and beautiful, but, that's gotta be mind blowing, over and over and over again. And I mean, why do you think so many of us are not in that space? I think that's the question more so. Is why. I
would like to say, after years of being and calling myself victimizing myself in certain situations, and I say victimizing very lightly, not in a very heavy situations, because I got to a point where I was always told what women were not to do. Right? But I was always wondering why women couldn't do those things, right? But I think I came to a realization as women, I think we spend a lot of time trying to put ourselves in spaces that we think we need to be supported in, right? And why I say that is because I think that's when I found my true calling, right? I wasn't intimidated by a room full of men, and I sure in hell was not intimidated by a room full of white men, right? And what that said was, this person has a personality. She can work in your room. But a lot of that training came from my mother. My family was very diligent in how they raised me. but I was also very encouraged as a woman that, you know, a woman who's successful in life is the one who's financially free. They didn't say
that's a bar. That's a bar.
And so they didn't say a CEO. They didn't say bidder. They didn't say this is who you're supposed to be. As a woman in real estate, I didn't walk in saying, I'm a woman and y'all better respect me. No, I said, oh, I'm a woman, and me being a woman don't mean nothing if I don't have my facts, right? So what I do is I spend a lot of time dealing and working with different people who are a lot smarter than me in different areas. I befriend them, and we get to really have conversations, and I ask genuine questions like, hey, what does this mean? Because I don't know what that is. And I guarantee you I have never had issues with a man telling me information that they're good at. Because one thing I learned about men is if they respect you and if you ask diligent questions, they're free flowers. They will give you information, right? But I think as a woman, I had to come to grips with myself and saying, okay, I can either use this as my advantage, or I can use being a woman as a disadvantage, right? So if I'm going to walk into a room full of men as a victim, I'm never going to get what I need from the situation, right? Mm-hmm. So I have to be realistic in saying, you know, a lot of men aren't really into the whole proactive measure. So how do I create a system where, as a woman, I'm very proactive? I don't like reactive because I don't like stress, right? So I can create this system and I can ask for them to be a part of it, but I can't force them, right? I have to show them why I think this proactive measure makes the most sense, and do it in a way where I'm not sounding like this antsy woman that they don't respect, or this woman that reminds them of their mother that they didn't respect, or this woman who reminds them of their nagging wife. Because as a woman, I know some things are bothersome. Mm-hmm. We're in an industry where it's very male dominated. So I had to be realistic with myself and saying, you got to take advantage of this opportunity, and you better spend some time really learning construction, really learning information, so that, you know, it's actually pretty cute. I have a pouch, and my pouch is my construction hat pouch, and also my tool set that I have, right? And I have a space where it has lip gloss and stuff on it. I wasn't going to change my womanism, my feminism, right? But I also had to be realistic with the fact that I am working with a very male-dominated industry. So if I need to have my boots on, and if they're Uggs and they just happen to be leather and they're cute and they have pink in them, so what? At least I'm out there working. Mm-hmm. And respect you, right? I don't make excuses. I show up. If I got to be there at 5:30 in the morning for them to open up construction because the GC's not answering, then that's what I do. Yeah. But there are situations where I have to not act like I'm the woman in ownership of it, because some people are just designed not to work with women, and they don't take leadership. They don't really listen to a woman for whatever reason, right? So I don't take it personal. Let's just get this business going. Let's finish this project, and I'll deal with you when we're done.
Absolutely.
It needs to be dealt with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so I want to touch on the customer service piece of it, right? Because this, you stress that obviously this is a business and an industry of servitude, right? And it goes both ways and always around, right? Whether you are a developer, a landlord, a general contractor. So I want to take some time for you to reflect on the customer service piece in the development world.
Where do I begin? So every deal has always been different, right? And why I say it's different is because you're dealing with different kinds of people. But at the same time, one of the best ways in getting service and customer service in line is learning how to meet people where they are, right? Don't ever assume that, you know, a tenant knows how to be a great tenant. Don't ever assume that. Don't ever assume a lawyer is going to be great at their job, right? You know, being a great lawyer. Right? Because again, every deal and every situation is different. Every character is different, right? So my advice would have to be really learn people, you know, really use the 80-20 rule. If you're hiring people, you need to do less talking and let the people you're hiring do all the talking. Because if you're sitting and listening, you can learn everything you need to learn within that 5 minute of conversation. And I think the mistakes I've done in the past is I've hired individuals who look like me because that's what we needed to do, right? Because I've learned that we don't get enough practical experiences. So, you know, I'm gun-hoing and trying to hire, you know, as many of African Americans or minority people as possible. But what I had to come to the realization is that it's not really about hiring as many minorities as possible. It's making sure we're hiring the right kind of minorities, because that sets a tone with how we do business. That sets a tone that we're just a company that just hire anybody because of one race. And that's a disadvantage for me. That's a disadvantage for whoever I'm hiring, because if I can't be a service to you and your productiveness, then how are you going to be a service to me and at the same time deliver to the community? Because anybody I bring to the table has to be able to deliver what we're saying we're going to do for this community. And I've been in situations where unfortunately we have had success, not so many success in delivery, and we've had very great success in delivery, right? So you got to take all those balance or situations and really, ask yourself, what is the message you're trying to send with this deal? But also understanding what is the purpose for this deal, so that you know not only how to hire, but who to hire, and who the end users are, right? Customer service is all about making sure you're delivering for services. If I tell a customer, my end user, that I'm going to deliver this fine, nice, beautiful apartment building, delivering some kind of crappy place, and they've already signed an intent to lease for me to get that construction loan, who's wrong in this situation? I am, because I didn't hold the bargain. And you need a bunch of other people around you who are experts at their own lane to hold the same excellence of responsibility and accountability. And to even, tell you in regards to accountability and all of that, one of the things that I wanted to focus on is AK development focuses on core principles, right? So as you're building your business, do you have principles? Do you have values and mission and systems that you technically operate out of? Because everything is going to be a distraction. Every deal is good, but do they actually fit within your core? Do they fall in the mission of your principles that you're working on?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. Like you mentioned, accountability, integrity, principles, and systems. And so I think, and you can probably agree, like your financial system is very important in development, right? So like you said, how you are timing out your projects and things of that nature, and basically just your overall financial health picture. How do you systematize that? Like, what do you have in place to make sure that that's a good picture all around?
I would say for me personally, and I would also recommend some of my peers or other individuals within the same group, whether it's financial groups or minority groups, I think we really need to be strategic with ourselves and being real with ourselves as to you can't go to a bank and expect them to give you some money and you don't have any collaterals, right? So what I've created a system of for myself is having multiple sources of collaterals. And what I mean by collaterals is you don't necessarily have to have, liquid cash money a lot of times to do deals. What you can do is if you have a property that has equity, that's a collateral, right? So then if I need a $200,000 to $400,000 deal, to be financed, I need to bring some money to the table. And a lot of times your collateral is owner's equity. And what that means is anytime a bank is doing financing for you, they like to see the 5 C's again, right? And those 5 C's within that is capital, right? And if you don't have cash capital, then you have to have collateral capital. And so what I created for myself was creating systems that allows me to have capital in different forms, right? And I'm not going to go into too much personal details, but it's one of those things where you have to be realistic with yourself and saying, for every $5,000 I touch, you don't realize how that $5,000 could turn into $25,000 collateral. And any bank will sign a deal with you without actually having your cash in their hands and being secure and knowing that they have your collateral. And that doesn't really put damages on you, but what it does is it create a shared system, right? So now this bank feels good about doing this project because everything has to make people feel good. They have to be comfortable with what they're doing with you. And I think that's a fair system to be a part of. But we've done deals where we just use a collateral, no cash. We've done deals where we've done collateral and cash. But it's not 50, 70, 80,000 cash. It might just be 10,000, 15,000 cash because 80% probably coming from my collateral. You get what I'm saying? So it kind of puts me in a space where I can literally be out here playing the game that I want to play, but also be very strategic as to how I move, right? Again, going back to what I said earlier, I don't play about my sleep. Right? So if my sleep is my 8 hours, that's, 8 hours of my capital is on my brain being rested, right? And I'm saying capital in a sense of my time is my only capital if I have no money. So I have to be very valuable in how a lot of that time is spent. I don't play about finance, and I spend 2 hours a day. That's a max of 730 minutes a year of just me focusing on only money and finance. Because if I don't understand it, how do I expect them to be okay with me? And let's be serious. Credit stands for what? Trust. If I'm asking for credit, then they got to be able to trust me, and we got to trust each other. Because if I'm coming aggressive to the banks, and what I mean by aggressive is I don't take a bank just based off what they tell me on documents.
I was just about to say that.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you said that. So, because oftentimes you got to go to the bank and tell them what you want, how you want it, how you want to see it, how your terms are. I mean, they're going to give you their terms, but you can always negotiate. You can always say, hey, well, what if I can do this? Or what if I can do this? Or what does this look like? What does that look like? And because I know you are not, you don't be going.
Not at all. And I'm going to tell you why I don't go, because, again, that idea started with me in my head. Everything started here first, right? So if I know that and I'm going to these places, if I'm going to be negotiating, I better have some value to negotiate, right? So if I know they're going to ask me to bring in $40,000 at 5%, psych, how about $20,000 cash, $50,000 in collateral, and 3.5% in interest rates. Now, every bank is not going to do that for you, right? But that comes with confidence, that comes with comfort, that comes with, hell, I know I'm going to pay these people back. So that puts me in a space of, what is the word I'm looking for? We don't all have it, but it's an obligation. That's you know what I'm saying? And that's part of what I mean by character, is that I now have an obligation to deliver to these individuals, whether this project goes through or not. That money has to be returned. And that's called relationships, right? And you build relationships by whatever mistakes you might have made. Nobody else needs to occur that mistake. Not my investors, not my bankers, not my city officials, nobody but yourself, because you put yourself in that situation. You got to get yourself out. But that's called accountability.
Absolutely. Man, so many gems on this interview, girl. So before we wrap up, something that I've heard you say before, and I really just want you to expand on it a little bit more. You say, do not generalize. You should always specialize. So What does that mean?
I guess, and I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, right? So where I said, because I see a lot of people do this, where they have a main job and then they try to go creating side hustles. And their side hustles doesn't necessarily correlate with their day job. So then you feel out of purpose. You feel so, all over the place. But you need the side hustle because that's your purpose and that's your why. But then you need this day job because that's what's floating everything else. Because a lot of times our whys are not our payers, right? And what I mean by that is a lot of our whys sometimes comes from our core issues internally that we're trying to still address. That doesn't pay unless you know how to monetize on it, right? So then what I had to come to an understanding was in saying, if I'm going to be sorry, what was the question again? I just lost my train.
Do not generalize. You should always specialize.
So then in saying that, the specialty for me when I was doing Wraparound was that I was a social worker. So when I transitioned into real estate, it was a very simple transition. And I left my day job at the level where I said, okay, I think I have reached a level of mental health work to where I don't have plan on being a mental health therapist. So maybe this is a shift that I need to be making before I get to a point of burnout, right? So I shifted before my time was ending. But it didn't end bad because it was a transition within what I was already doing. So when I got out of the social work job, I went straight into real estate, but I still had the people skill set that I desired, right? So when I talk about specializing in something, that is exactly what I'm talking about, is when you have your day job, and your day job is also similar to your purpose and your passion, but it's maybe something you wanted to do for yourself. Or the fact that, Apple, for example, is not out there buying all kinds of products, right? Just to say they in this and they in that. But really what they're doing is they're specializing in the softwares and the technology that they release, and they release valuable quality products that's in the hands of a lot of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So imagine if Apple decides to own a beauty salon store, and they the ones working the beauty salon store as well, and they got a food service opening at the same time. You're going to want to know, why in the heck is a software company trying to open up a food venture? Because they don't quit. So that's what I mean. Journalizing. When you journalize, you put yourself in a situation where you're just all over the place. You're doing all these things. Really, real estate brings me money, gives me the opportunity to create wealth for families and communities. And at the same time, to reduce poverty, you have to have stable housing, right? So it's hitting all the issues that I have a purpose to address. But what I get from real estate allows me to create side hobbies, right? I own salons, I own these things, but I don't actually do hair. I don't physically show up to these places unless I'm needed. And the only time I'm needed is when I hold my monthly or at bi-weekly classes with the women around mindsets and, you know, creating a space for them to grow so that they become owners or whatever it is that they want to do.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. Whew, yeah, there's so many gems. I mean, from what you were just saying about, like you said, I love that, you know, you took your social work experience, because not only did you have that skill set, but then you also still had all of your connections, right? Yeah. And then, like you said, with Apple, they are releasing a software, but they're getting better and better and better and better. You got the 2.0 to 3.0 to 8.0, whatever, right? And so being able to work at your skill and at your craft, I mean, we hear it all the time, right? Like, you don't become a millionaire overnight. You know, you don't become right? So you have to be consistent at whatever it is that you're working at. So you are absolutely right. So, man, so many gems. So before we end this interview, I need you to share with everybody where they can find you.
Okay. So I'm actually I usually don't even do this, right? So one of the things I'm willing to do is actually have people go to the website, sign up. So we're on akdevmke.com. Go on the website and go ahead and connect with us. The first 5 people get 15 minutes of consultation. But also on Instagram, we're at akdevmke 21, I think it is. And then Mind Control 21 _.
Love it. So that's akdevmke.com. For the first 5 people, I told her, I said, girl, you probably gonna have like 50 people. For the first 5 people who go and to contact us and fill out your information, you will get a free 15-minute consult with Miss Ariam, developer. And make sure you follow her. Her Instagram handle and everything will be in the notes. So make sure you guys follow. So thank you so much for coming on and dropping these
I appreciate
gems.
it. Thank you for
coming on to the virtual summit. See, listen, I was very specific about picking you as a badass woman in real estate. Okay.
The way I've been sending it to all my families, and one of them said, "Is that an ASS?" I was like, "Yeah." Like a donkey? I'm like, "Not really."
Love it.
I appreciate it. Thank you, though.
Thank you
for having us. All right, bye.
You started with a dream, now you leading a team, working and closing them deals, working with purpose. You don't walk around with a purse, but you working it, walking the hills. Beauty and brains, speaking and fighting for change, intellectual and clever. You show the